leadership. They're just so vitally important to the community, to our outlook, to our health. It's just a critical piece of the puzzle in terms of how do we get people to sort of see the finish line, if you will, right? To believe, to feel that they can do it, that they can accomplish it. It's all about how do you know, when we look at health, we don't look at, oh, this light flashed. I thought somebody sent him a text. Rich, don't get up here, keep talking. Okay. No, but this part is important, right? It's important that we see ourselves successful. It's really important because when that happens, people's outlook becomes brighter and they can sort of believe that they can get to the finish line and live the healthiest life possible and be all that they can be. And so I'm really appreciative to the sponsors, number one, Novartis, Merck, Genentech, you know, our large sponsors that are saying to BDO, man, job well done. We're going to back you. We're going to support you. We see you as a valued partner, and let's work and let's improve the Black community together, right? So it's really important, and so thank you. Yeah. I also want to thank and congratulate the honorees, the 23 honorees, because it's really, you know, it's a special moment because not only are you here, but if you think about it, you know, what makes people great? It's the intangible things, their commitment, their passion, their willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done. And the fact that you're here today, the award ceremony is tonight, but man, there's thought leadership today. I want to share my expertise with the community because I've got something to say, and I know that they'll listen. And so for us, and we were talking about it this morning, you know, it's the understanding piece. Understanding that some of the brightest minds in healthcare here today, right? But they're here this morning and they're going to share their expertise. And for us, we know after 18 years, really understanding our audience, we know that this is a really significant moment because not only are you here, but now you're in our house because our audience looks at our website as theirs. It's they're the ones that own the website. And so you're here in our house, and we're going to have some really interesting and important conversations. And so I'm really excited about what we're going to do today. I will be sitting down there listening and learning, and I'm going to let my esteemed colleagues and experts run the show, and just really excited. And just so you know, we are streaming this live. There's probably going to be, I keep telling people, maybe 10,000 people that are going to see this, but I'm not going to lie. It's probably going to be more like 60, 70,000 because we've got a massive marketing effort. So let's do this. Thank you.
See, he's so tall. I got to move that down. You know, I got to blame my mother for that one. So good morning and welcome to the 8th Annual Thought Leadership Summit. My name is Ellis Dean. I'm Director of Digital Programming and Production at BlackDoctor.org. And on behalf of everyone at BDO, I want to say thank you for joining us here today. I also want to thank our sponsors, without whom this program and gala tonight would not have been possible. Those sponsors include Novartis, Merck, Genentech, Boston Scientific, Gilead, Roche, Amgen, Sanofi, and Cedars-Sinai. I want to thank you all for being a part of this wonderful, wonderful ceremony. I also want to thank our audience, our BDO audience, many of whom are watching the stream. You are the reason we are here today. So this occasion is also about you. Okay, can I share a quick story with you all? Before I started working with BDO, my training is in mental health, right? So I was a mental health counselor. And as a counselor, my primary focus was on children and adolescents. So one of my first clients after grad school was a 13-year-old young man. He was living with his grandparents, and they were having some trouble with his escalating behavioral issues that they could no longer manage. So they brought him to the outpatient clinic at Grady Hospital, if y'all know that, in Atlanta, Georgia, where I worked at the time. Needless to say, I was excited, right? So I'm like, fresh out of grad school, I'm full of all of this energy and just facts and theories and figures, and I was going to change the world with the way I was going to change this kid's life, and I was going to take on the world. And Needless to say, I bombed. He didn't say anything, not one word for the first 3 sessions I was talking to him. And I had all these great questions. I'm just, hey, theories and all this stuff. Never, not a word, just looked at me. And then as we're in our 4th session, I had this aha moment. And I realized, okay, I asked him the first and most honest question of my counseling career. And I just said, you think I'm full of it, don't you? And he laughed. And that was a moment when I realized that in order to be effective, your client has to be both seen and heard. I was telling him what he needed. As a counselor, I was the expert, but I was telling him. And I never took the opportunity to learn what he needed, to see him, to listen to him. So when people ask me, why are you so happy working at BDO? Why do you do what you do? How do you do all those Facebook Lives and don't have any problems doing it? And I say, because I work for a company that sees our audience and they hear them. And that's what we're responsive to. So Jade with her unbelievable content, Derek with the way he reaches millions of people each month, our support staff that without the site and everything wouldn't be running, all of those, we're focused on one singular goal, and that is to see and hear our clients every single day. So that's why we're here at Thought Leadership Summit. We're going to see and hear some wonderful panels about breast cancer, about health equity, about mental health, and we're going to learn from some wonderful young students. We've got back-to-back panels today, and we're starting it off with our rock star, also known as Ricky Fairley from Touch the Breast Cancer Alliance. Y'all welcome Ricky Fairley to the stage. And her Breasty Warriors.
My Breasty Warriors, yeah. So happy to be here today and be here with this awesome team and talk about my favorite topic, and it should be everybody's favorite topic, breast cancer, because we can all do better. So I have an amazing panel of my friends and my supporters, and I'm so excited to do this today. So I'm just going to start out by giving you some facts and figures about Black breast cancer, because Black breast cancer is a disease. It's different from white breast cancer and Asian breast cancer. It is a thing. And we started to popularize that a few years ago. But Black women have a 41% higher mortality rate than white women. Black women have a 39% higher recurrence rate of breast cancer than white women. Black women get triple negative breast cancer, the worst one, that's the one I had, and I'm a miracle to be here, at 3 times the rate of white women, and we don't really know why. And one of the most devastating facts is that Black women under the age of 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate of white women and die at 3 times the rate of white women, well before they would have that first mammogram at age 40. Those numbers are devastating, ridiculous, and we have to do better. And we need better science. We've done a lot of research at Touch the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, and we look back in history to see, okay, are these drugs working for us? Were they ever tested on Black bodies? And there were no Black bodies in the test for the drugs that we have as standard of care. And right now, even the drugs being made, we have a 3% participation in clinical trials. And until we get more Black women into the science and understanding our risks, we're going to have these horrible numbers in place. So we at Touch the Black Breast Cancer Alliance, we try to look at what we call the to and through the Black breast cancer experience. So we start, and I'm going to start with my young women and talk about young women and how they need to understand their risk. Because if Black breast cancer is a thing, then Black breast health is a thing. So we need to know what we're up against. And then we try to take you all the way through and give you all kinds of support through the disease, but also trying to get more people into clinical trials. So we have 2 major campaigns that we'll talk about today, but our For the Love of My Girls campaign we'll talk about for young women. And then our clinical trials campaign is WhenWeTrial.org. And since last May, we've signed up 9,000 Black women for clinical trial portals, which is I'm proud of that number, but it's not enough. It's not enough to move the needle. And so we are trying to make it happen. So let me introduce my panel, and I'm going to really let them do the big introductions. But I love my breasties. So I'm going to start with my breasties. So I have Laura Crandon, and Laura has an amazing organization called Touch for Life. And she's really trying to work on help educate Black women about genetics and genomics. And those words are like foreign language to our community, right? And then I have my precious Sloan Cargill. And Sloan's actually a development director at Howard University. But she is your typical young Black woman who doesn't have disease, but has a risk ahead of her. We want her to give her perspective on what that looks like. And then we have Haley Brown. She's our director of partnerships and programming. She's also my daughter. She's my boss. But she runs our Young Women's Campaign and really all of our events in the community, which we do a lot. And then my baby breastie, I call her my baby breastie, Latoya Bolts Johnson. She is a triple negative thriver, survivor, advocate. She was diagnosed with stage 3C, triple negative breast cancer at age 36 with 3 babies under 7. And she just finished treatment about a month ago, and she is kicking butt. But unfortunately, she is a typical triple negative patient, and she's the reality of our situation. And then I have my awesome pharma friends, right? We have Sherry Humphrey, who's here from Merck, and she's going to talk about all things that are happening with Merck in the breast cancer space. And then my awesome supporter, Rashima Kemps-Polanco from Novartis. And she is, I'm going to read her title because it's so amazing. She is all things cancer at Novartis, right? She's badass. Can I say that word? Anyway, they both are. So we have this amazing panel, and we're really going to just talk about to and through the breast cancer experience. So we have a few questions, but I'm going to start with you guys, with our pharma friends. You guys, why do you think these numbers are happening? Why do you think breast cancer is such a thing, and what kind of attention has not been brought to it that we need to be changing? So Rashima, when did you start, babe?
Sure. Look, I think these are things that are not new, right? And one of the things I always talk about is if you actually, even before I get to breast cancer, I think one of the things that has put such a light on this is what we saw happening during COVID. Many of us in our community knew that there were healthcare disparities, but the world did not.
Right.
And when the world was put on pause, we saw it. And so not only did we see it for COVID, we saw it for other diseases, and breast cancer is one of those. And so, yes, we know what the social determinants of health, education, what is your opportunity, access to good and quality health care. And the one thing I'll say about that, sometimes when you say those things, it almost seems like it's blaming the patient, right? Because, well, maybe they don't have a certain education, or they're under-supported or underserved, as we call it. But what we do know, at least even about maternal health, you can control all of those variables. They can be exactly the same. Great access to health care, education, socioeconomic status, and we still see a difference in outcomes. And so what we have to do is figure out, how do we democratize outcomes so that no matter where you live, your zip code or what have you is not the #1 social determinant of health. And if you survive, and if we just close that gap between what we see in Black women and non-Black women, our cure rates will go up dramatically, even if you never advance cure rates beyond where we are today, just closing the gap. And so, it's multifactorial. It is partnerships between private, government, pharma, the industry, academia, and wonderful people like you who, are on both sides of it, right? Having been, you're a breastie, but also now really, driving the charge for this, all coming together to say, how do we solve all these different issues at scale and equitably? And that's how we're really going to have an impact. And so we can talk later about what Novartis is doing about that to do its part.
That's awesome. Rashima, I almost hate the words, the social determinants of health. They're like a bucket you can kind of throw everything into and blame the patient.
Right.
So we have to change that.
Right. And I think okay, I think it is on. Just to, I think, cover that very well. And I think COVID did really help bring a lot of these things to the forefront. And like you, the whole social determinants of health, it does look like it's a patient issue. And it also honestly sounds sometimes like it's something easy to fix. Well, if we give people money or we move them or we move doctors here, that they're still going to be treated. But what I really like to focus on is also health equity. Because social determinants of health, even when you get rid of all those things, and I know you were probably at ASCO a couple years ago, like I was, and even last year, what we're finding is, as you take a look at Black women and breast cancer, just because their socioeconomic status is higher does not mean that they're treated any better or that their mortality is any better. So to me, in addition to some of the social determinants of health issues that we need to deal with, it's also a health equity issue. It's a bias issue from treaters. It's a bias issue from some companies that are doing clinical trials. Now, I know ours have a very, very strong goal right now as we are doing research in clinical trials, and they have goals for how many Black patients or other patients of color we need to get in clinical trials. But when you talk about clinical trials, and we may talk about this a little bit later, no matter who you are, it is still not easy. Just because they've identified and they said, we want you, don't build it, and they're not all going to come, because it is very difficult to get involved in clinical trials. So as a pharma industry, we also have to take a look at what is it that we're doing to get patients enrolled, to make it easier for them to have access, as well as partnering with healthcare providers to understand there are some inherent biases in how you are treating patients, and you need to get over it and you need to fix it.
We do. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. It's so true. I think that, we all know that, oh my gosh, there's health disparities with Black people. What a concept when we had that sort of intersection of George Floyd and COVID, right? So, but now it's on the table, and that's a good thing. And I do feel like we're getting conversations happening and recognition of that. So I'm going to pass it down to my LaToya, my baby breastie. So she's going along in her life with her 3 beautiful daughters, and bam, she gets hit with triple negative breast cancer. So tell them how you found out about your diagnosis.
Good morning, everyone. So I found out about my diagnosis after doing my own self breast exam and finding my own lump. And I really didn't think much of it at that time, because I had recently stopped breastfeeding my 1-year-old at that time. She just turned 1. And so it was persistent. Had a mammogram and sonogram, thankfully, was ordered by a Black female physician. And I was actually went through the whole, showed up for the mammogram, and I received resistance. I was told, you're too young, you don't belong here, stop, you don't need this. And I had to advocate for myself. I had to push for it. And it's like, no, I drove 45 minutes to get here. Gas is almost $4 a gallon. I want to go ahead and get this mammogram done. And so I had to really push for it. And long story short, I was told that I would receive the results by a physician. I was told that I would receive results, and I received the actual mammogram report. The initial one stated that I was actually misdiagnosed. It said that I had a galactocele, which is a benign milk cyst. And a couple of days later, a radiologist calls me and say, no, I think the margins look a little bit more suspicious and we should recommend a biopsy. And so even after that point, again, I was told a physician would call me with the results. And I was actually working when I found out on July 26, 2021 about my diagnosis. I was working in the ER. I'm a physician assistant. I work in the emergency room. And I received a text message that I had a portal alert notification, and it was my biopsy report. So I found out that I had triple negative invasive ductal carcinoma, high grade 3, by receiving a text message on my phone.
Outrageous. Outrageous. Yes. At age 36.
36 years
with
old.
With 3 babies.
No known family history. Yeah.
So, but she's the norm. She, we get dismissed by doctors. Oh, it's okay. Come back in 6 months. You're going to be fine. Stage 3 triple negative. Stage 3 triple negative, and she wasn't fine. But she had to fight for her care. And she's a PA. She's a PA, working in the emergency room. So that's what we're dealing with, right? So I'm going to pass it down to Laura. Laura is a metastatic breast cancer thriver, and basically traded in her corporate card to do this work and try to help Black women. So tell us a story about what you do.
Thank you so much.
How you're dealing with this.
Yes, thank you so much, Ricky. Thank you for having me. Laura Crandon, I was a healthcare executive, health plan executive for the last 15 years. And I started on this journey in 2016 with my first diagnosis, and had the jackpot with triple positive, so the opposite. and had radiation, surgery, chemo, including another year of antigen, Herceptin. And then I was in ED, no evidence of disease until I had the headache of life. And I went to the ED, and they give you the pain scale. And as many of us know, when we show up and say, we've got, what's your pain from 1 to 10? And I'm like, it's 12. Are you believed? And fast forward, it was metastatic to my brain. And I've had 3 brain surgeries, including one just about 6 weeks ago, which is fantastic.
And she called me the next hour.
And I do this work because I have the privilege of having a voice. I started an organization called Touch for Life, which we are focused on breast health equity in particular, and specifically upstream of the clinical trials, looking at genomic and genetic testing. And it's because in oncology, the trend is precision oncology based on the mutations that you have and the characteristics of the tumor that you have. The medications that are being developed are pinpointed and targeted. I wonder if you know what the percentage of Black women who are referred for this type of testing is. Are there any guesses? It's about 20%. And so that means that the treatment that comes our way is like a sledgehammer. It's not precise, and it may not work, and it is not working as the data show. And so we need to be represented in the bio data so that when they're looking for mutations, they're looking for what's driving our cancers. And when the drugs are developed and the therapies are developed to be pinpointed, we need to be in that number to be tested so that it shows up that I have a checkpoint inhibitor or PD-L1, or these 3 and 4 digit numbers. And those things then really help to guide and impact my care so that my survivability is higher. And so our goal is to make sure that we are educating Black women and physicians about the importance of equitably prescribing these tests so that we are included, and that women know that they have the right to ask and advocate for it. So it's a 2-pronged effort. And lastly, because of my health plan experience, it's also going to the large payers and challenging them to do better and do differently about how they evaluate physicians and the care that we get as Black and brown women. And so that's what we do, and that's my charge. And I'm here on this earth as a miracle, having those surgeries and having this metastatic, and to do something about it. And that's my mission, and I want to make sure that we're making a difference there.
Walking down the street, you would not think she had brain cancer, right? From her breast. Wow, wow. So I now want to talk about Sloan. So I brought Sloan on the panel. She's one of my daughter's good friends, and she's just trying to live her life as a young woman. Did you ever think about breast cancer until you knew me? I mean, did you ever think about it in your life? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, hello, everyone. I have thought about breast cancer for a long time. A month after I was born, my father's oldest sister passed away from breast cancer. And she was under 35. I don't remember her exact age, but I believe about 34 when she passed away. So my entire life, I've known that story. And it was just one of those things that my parents would talk about, but we didn't really talk about it deeply. We didn't really talk about the risks. So knowing you and knowing Haley and in my 20s really was the time where I started to learn about not only the, our family members that passed away from breast cancer, but actually just having the opportunity to meet survivors and meet breasties that have been able to have diagnoses and be able to go through treatment. And that's been a really powerful thing because of my ability to know people that advocate for us, to learn early, to advocate for your doctors. It's been a part of how I change my own experience with my doctors. And I've always told my doctors, I am concerned about breast cancer. I had someone who died very young in my family, and always been told, well, when you get in your 30s, you can start worrying about that. But just this past January, I actually got a new doctor And I advocate, I told her, I said, this is something I'm concerned about. So for the first time, I actually had someone take me very seriously and say, we understand your concern. So in 2 weeks from tomorrow, I'll be going for a mammogram and an ultrasound. And it feels good to be able to have someone hear me, listen to me, and set up the appointments and the screenings and not just push it off.
But you had to push for that.
I had to push for that. I had to push to find a Black doctor, Black female doctor. I had to, I kind of called it a deferred maintenance. Throughout my 20s, I'm just grinding, trying to work my way up from that first salary, and took a little bit. Now I'm in a place where I'm like, no, I'm going to take that time off and go to this appointment. I'm going to search through ZocDoc. I'm going to go through all these different places to find a doctor that works for me. And it takes time. It takes, ability to block off my calendar. And it takes saying, I need you to listen to me, hear me out. Don't ignore, my concerns.
That's great. But you're blessed because so many young women don't have a family history, or they do and they don't know about it. Yeah. Black families, we don't talk about health at the kitchen table until Uncle Cookie gets his leg amputated, right? Or something like how that happened, right? So you were blessed to at least have those conversations with your mom, right? So, but we're trying to help young women have these conversations. So Haley was my caregiver when I was sick. And basically, I had triple negative, and I went through all the treatment and everything, and my cancer came back. Which is very typical of triple negative. And so my doctor at the time said, "Okay, Ricky, you now have 2 years to live. Get your affairs in order. We don't have any drugs for you." I said, "Well, I can't really die right now because I have a kid at Dartmouth and she's got to finish school, and so me and God have to work this out." So Haley, that was Haley. And so it's been 11 years for me, so I'm very blessed. But Haley came to work with me, about almost a year ago now, right, Haley? She said, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to come help you because you're a crazy person." So now she's my boss. But I think when she came in, she saw an opportunity to speak to young women. She felt like she needed to help more people like Sloan. And so, Haley, what are you doing, girl?
Yeah. So thank you guys for having us today. So my mom was diagnosed when I was 19. Again, hearing that your mom's has 2 years to live is like wild. And I'm so happy that we are 11 years later, looking great.
Yeah.
But I try to think of all the things that I wish I had known when she got sick, and all the things that would make this. She describes her getting cancer as like finding a really, really dark room. And how do I make that room a little less dark for young women and give them the tools that they need to educate themselves and empower themselves to advocate for themselves? And so my background is in education. I taught elementary school for 8 years. And so I've been thinking about how I can bring those skills to this space and really educate young women on checking their girls. Archiving for Love of My Girls. We love wearing our brand. But how can I get them to unlock their her story, talk with their family about their shared health history, get to know their girls, know when and how to do so. And then just really choosing Black breast health. Black women under 35 get breast cancer at 2 times the rate and die at 3 times the rate of white women, which again sounds crazy and something that you don't really see on the day-to-day, but this is real. And we're also not told to get mammograms until we're 40. And so these things nothing is aligning here. Mammogram guidelines, screening guidelines, they just don't match our urgent needs as young women. And so we have to self-advocate, and we have to know the tools and have the things that we need to empower ourselves and feel like we're a larger part of the conversation. It's so important we have a shared health history worksheet on our website. And in that worksheet, you go through your mom's side, your dad's side, and go through, it's more than just breast cancer. It has all the common Black ailments that happen in life. And it's really, really nice because you do get into the details of how old that person was. But because knowing your history is very important. I have a great-grandmother, a grandmother, and a mother that had breast cancer, and they had no genetic mutations. So my shared health history is all that I have to prove to a doctor that I need better screening. And so, yeah, that's the work that I've been doing. And it's been really, really fun to like create this under my mom's tutelage. So thank you for that. Thank you for the space to educate young Black women and make sure we have the tools that we need.
So to my pharma friends, you guys are working on drugs, and we're trying to help you work on drugs and help you bring Black women to trials, and we can talk about that in a minute. But what do you think are your barriers? Like, do you feel like you are empowered to do this work to help us? Rashima, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So the short answer is yes, and that's why I'm sitting here, and I think it's important for there to be diversity at the table.
And thank God for you. And be the boss. The boss, right?
To have because we are privileged to have these chairs at the table. And, you know my mom is watching this now, but my mom was a person who raised me, who said, look, if you're going to sit there, if you're going to do something, do it well or don't do it at all. And basically it means if you're going to be at the table, take up space, make a difference, help others, or get out of it and let someone else do it. Don't be afraid. Don't be tentative. Right. And so how do we each use our platforms of leadership, wherever you find yourself, to give voice to the voiceless? And that's really, how I think about it. I care about all patients. We are all humans, right? We all bleed red. But when I see equity issues, I'm thinking about, well, how do I level the playing field so that all have an equal opportunity at the same cure rates? And that's what drives me. And so some of the barriers that can be there, right, is, how do you build trust? And, our community has a good reason to have mistrust, right? And I won't go through the history. You all know what I'm talking about, right? And it dates back for decades. And so there's a mistrust with the healthcare system. How do you reestablish that? How do you communicate it? Why is it that if you say you're in pain, right, that you're told you can bear it, you're strong enough, but someone else is in pain, right, they get something else, and things like that, right? That we have to create more equity around. I think the other barrier is focus, right? Moving things from, well, that's the right thing to do, to know there's an economic incentive to doing it. And we have talked about diversity overall, diversity in clinical trials for a very long time, and everyone will agree it's the right thing to do. And for me, it feels like it sits in a charitable space. And Linda is here. She knows I talk about this all the time, right? We have crossed the threshold of it's the right thing to do. That's been proven. That's known. So what are the consequences of not doing it? And that's when it starts to make a difference in our industry and for patients. And so we see that starting to happen. And I think once we can look at, all of the reasons in the healthcare ecosystem and in our communities and figure out how do you correct those organic incentives that sit in the system, right, that actually work against equity, start to correct those and point everything in the right direction, we can start to equalize outcomes for patients. And so I think, but it takes all of us working together. It's a huge problem, right. Ricky, you know that.
It is.
And no one pharma company, this is why we're both, here, right. No one entity can solve it. We have to all be on the same page. And I'd love to hear.
Absolutely.
You have to be intentional.
You have to be intentional and not like it's the nice thing to do. Well, that'll take forever.
Right.
What is it that you're required to do that aligns you to the right thing? But if you don't do it, also what's the consequence of that as well?
Right. And I think, we've both been in the industry long enough where it is about the business. It's about the dollars. We're in pharma. It's about the dollars. However, I think good news is, with people like us that do the research, we talk to the patients. You're able to go into a room and say, this isn't about $1. This is about the right thing to do. And we both work for companies that have very strong efforts for diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only from a commercial perspective, from a research perspective. And that is that's why I feel proud to work in the industry, because especially in oncology, because I know that that is something that we can inform. But I do remember the days when you're sitting around the table and being like, well, it's a little group, maybe we'll try a pilot. No, this is a very serious illness. And especially when you're talking about triple negative breast cancer and you're talking about the challenges that you face, guidelines, Right now, testing guidelines are 40, 50, depending upon where you're looking. But in triple negative breast cancer, 40% of the patients are below 40. That's why you can't get a test.
Say that again.
40% of patients with triple negative breast cancer are below the age of 40. But most guidelines say it's 40 or 50 is when you should start testing. Major medical guidelines, which means that even if you want to advocate for yourself and you're going in and you have a family history, you probably have to go through 20 steps to prove to the insurance company that you need to do it, to get your doctor to say, well, but you've got to do all that work on your own. And you guys at your age are fortunate. My age, my parents are 85, 86. I literally had, I guess was maybe 6 months ago, a breast cancer scare. I went for the first mammogram. Oh, we see some spots, we'll come in, when you go the second time and they're taking long, you're like, okay, something's wrong.
Right.
Okay, Mrs. Humphrey, we want you to come back, do the biopsy. We go through all that. I'm talking to my parents about this. I never knew my mom's sister had breast cancer. I knew she had a swollen arm, she had lymphedema, but because she had breast cancer, she had surgery, and that was one of the side effects. Yeah. And as I was looking, they did family history. Thank the dear Lord. Everything was fine. It was just some masses, but I got them tagged. So, I'll continue to go back for testing. My husband, prostate cancer, his father had it. His mother never told him. So the point being, as you have an opportunity to ask the questions, because if they're, and maybe this is a bias, if they're probably 70 or older in your family, they are not going to proactively tell you anything. They don't even want to say the word cancer.
They don't.
So from a pharma company perspective, I think we have the tools. I think it's the trust. I think it's the awareness. I think it's working and partnering with you to give you the educational tools that make sense. Reggie and I and the team have talked about this, but how can we boil it down that it makes sense? Biomarker testing, PD-L1, those are complicated words.
Right.
You need to ask for a test to know your genetic makeup so that we can pinpoint what type of intervention we can do to help you.
Yeah. Laura, you're itching to talk. Go ahead.
I know. Yeah, we created a series called Black Genes Matter. Black epidemiologist out of UNC, out of Vanderbilt UNC, and a Black geneticist and researcher out of UNC, and a previvor whose dad had prostate cancer and mom died of breast cancer, and talked about knowing that, getting tested, and then taking the steps to mitigate her risk because they were high. And just want to make the point, because you get 50% of your DNA from your dad and 50 from your mom. And so it's possible that if a male relative had a form of cancer, you in fact could be at risk. It's not just breast cancer. And if your relative, if you had breast cancer or prostate cancer, your child, male or female, son or daughter, should also get tested. And so these are the things that we're sharing with people. We had a person who was on that, in that workshop, reach out to us afterwards and say, I didn't know about my health history. And my sister and I started to research it, ask our parents, and we discovered, oh my gosh, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, breast cancer, brain cancer, prostate cancer. It was all over the place, and no one talked about it. And now we are being screened and we are being watched and followed. And it's about changing lives like that and educating people every day. So the work you're doing with the worksheet to have the health history, it's really important that we do that and get that message out, and we can't do it enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And guys, we did a bunch of research. We talked to 300 breasties about 2 years ago. We did some quant research to really understand the fear of clinical trials. And we know, they know about Henrietta Lacks, that comes up, all the earned medical mistrust. And we know about just not lack of understanding, but really the fear is the fear of the unknown. So Black people, because we don't talk about science, because doctors don't invite us to trials, we don't know what they are. And so the resounding thing we kept hearing was, you're going to get the sugar pill and die. Well, there is no sugar pill in cancer research, but that was not clear at all. And that was the biggest fear. And when you break down what standard of care is and explain it in very simple terms, because as soon as you introduce a word that they can't spell, it's like, you lost them, right? So all the words have to be spellable, right? They have to be whatever for the 6-year-old. That's why they talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old. But it has to be clear and concise and elementary. and then they get it. And it's simple things like, you know, that Advil you took last week, it was in a clinical trial. You know, that heart medicine you gave your dog, it was in a clinical trial. I'm like, yeah, wait a minute, I'll do that. I want to sign up for that. I don't want to die. And so I think it's how we take all this information, but break it down so people understand it. Because once they understand it, they engage, right? And it's just that, you know, those are the messages that we're trying to get out. But I think that you can see that the variety of or the level of understanding, it doesn't matter how much money you have, what education you have, just science is just not unknown. And so we have to teach about it. Hale, you want to talk?
Yeah. I think too, for the young woman, I can be aware and I can know all of these things, and I can be, you know, I do know that I should be aware of my health in a way that I probably don't talk about. But how do I turn that awareness into action? And that's kind of where the young woman is right now. I feel like it's really easy to know that you have a shared health history, or really, you know, not easy, but you got to talk with your family. But I think, when I started this campaign, I got a board of young women together, 18 to 35. I have 13 of them, and made sure that they had different walks of life represented in this group. So because 18 to 35, you can be a mom at either end of that. You can be a student at either end of that. So I really wanted to honor that age demographic. And what's cool about this age demographic is we can not only talk to our parents, but also our kids. And so it's a really fun target demographic. But it's really about how do I turn that awareness into action, because I can talk to my family, get my shared health history, but then even just making that doctor's appointment is sometimes really, really tricky. Feeling like you can take off work when you just start a new job because you're in your 20s or whatever it is. It's a lot. And so I think that taking everything in bite-sized chunks and giving them it's literally a worksheet that you filled out when you were in elementary school that helps you talk with your family about this taboo topic that isn't so taboo. We're talking about our bodies. My body's not taboo. That's just not the case. And so I think that if we can just give people those bite-sized chunks and bite-sized ways to engage in their health and not just make it not feel so crazy about it, that would be really, really helpful for young women. So I encourage everyone to go check out these worksheets and materials, because they are really bite-sized chunks to get involved. And then speaking of just the to and through experience, we're really working on making sure that young women also know what clinical trials are. It's good to know about them before they need them. This doesn't have to be something that you come across when you need it. How powerful that you find out you have breast cancer, and in that moment you can ask, got any clinical trials for me? Just because they had that knowledge. So just trying to give all those little chunks and make sure they have the tools now, because these things don't have to be things that you find out once you're sick or when you finally ask your parents. You can just be involved.
Yeah. I just have a quick story, to make this really, really real for people. We have thrivers in this room. I lost my best friend, and my team who's here, they know this, right? This is one of the things that gives me so much inspiration. She was 48 years old. And if I had a twin, she would have been my twin. Right? We were best friends through college. And even my kid's godmother. And this is someone who was highly educated. She was a corporate lawyer. And she was diagnosed with breast cancer the first time the day after I had my daughter. My daughter's 11 years old, right? And that's how we always knew how many years, because it was always around my daughter's birthday. And so she had the primary, all the treatment. She had radiation, she had chemo, she had all of it, and over 6 months. And then she was in remission for 6 or 7 years. And what I learned in that was, you think people really understand their disease because they are highly educated, because they are, and me being in this space, I had so much guilt when her cancer came back, because I thought, okay, what should I have said to her? What should I have? She came to my house one day, she was limping. And I said, well, what's going on? And she's like, oh, I've been running these marathons and it's my sciatic nerve. And I was like, okay. And then she came back again and she was limping worse. And I said, hey, have you had a scan? And she's like, no, I'm going to the chiropractor. I said, okay. And then she went to the orthopedic doctor. And I said, do they know that you are a breast cancer survivor? So the orthopedic doctor said, now this was also in a community setting because she was working in Pennsylvania. She wasn't at an academic, so she's seeing these doctors in a community setting. So then the orthopedic guy sends her to get a scan. She gets the scan. I'm driving back from work one day. It comes through on my phone. I pull over to the side and I look at it and I said, oh my goodness, her cancer's back. She's got metastatic breast cancer. That's what it looks like, right? Just bone mets. That's what I'm looking at. She didn't understand it. And this is a highly educated person. And she's like, well, what does it mean? What does it say? And I said, oh my, this is my best friend. I have to tell her, or I'm sitting in a car, what this means. And so she gets into Emory. She goes back to Atlanta. She gets into Emory, gets fabulous care. And she does well for a couple of years after, but then it didn't turn out well. What I would say though, she always had a plan about what was next, line of therapy, right? Around It was the mindset and the mentality of keeping herself in a certain mindset. But one of the things she said to me when she was being treated at Emory, she said, I am so privileged and blessed. I have great insurance. I have great support. I have a car. Like I have all of these things. I have money. And she said, I was standing next to a woman who has to come back to get chemo. And she was crying because she didn't know how she was going to get there. There was no transportation. There was no transportation. So she paid for it anonymously for this woman to come and get her chemo. But my point is, even when you look at the social economic situation, as I was talking about earlier, there's still an educational gap there to understand the science, right? Because the science is so complicated. And the families around them, even her family was like, how could this happen? We thought she was cured. And so understanding that certain types of breast cancer can come back or are likely to come back, and how can you remain vigilant, right? And insist on scans, even if it's not in the guidelines right now, right? And then the other piece is even those patients recognize the inequity of other patients as they're going through treatments. And so you think about her experience, how much worse potentially could the woman who can't afford to go back and forth to chemo, what will her outcomes look like? And so that's what we have to change. What I'm excited about, I have to say, is the commitment that companies like Novartis, companies like Merck, Genentech, others, I think this is the time now.
This is the time.
The money, and I talked about the economic consequences. The money, the funding is there. Our companies are putting the effort in, are putting the funding, are driving the partnerships. And so we can't lose this moment where everybody is on the same page, from the insurance companies, from ASCO, from the medical societies. The doctors want to do it. We just now have to band together and drive it through.
Which is why I never say no and I never sit in my bed, because the time is now. And I feel like we have to go everywhere and talk about it every way we can.
Yes.
And to add to that, I think with both of our companies, it's not just at the local level. If you've seen the last couple of years, this is going all the way up to the United States government.
Yes.
You know, we have presidents that are sitting in roundtables talking to pharmaceutical executives around what are the major health issues and how do we overcome them. Yeah. And that is, I mean, the bad news is we had a lot of social unrest a few years ago, but you got to strike while the iron's hot. It's top of mind, and we've got to continue to keep it top of mind and not, well, okay, that was a couple of years ago. Now let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I was actually at the White House yesterday with Danielle Santabelle, and you do feel the passion, you do feel the commitment of the government to support it. So I'm going to let LaToya tell her story because she has a great story. And I know what I'll tell you what you're going to say, but I'm not going to tell you. But no, she got diagnosed right when Keytruda was approved by the FDA, and so she called me the day before her mastectomy. She had already done chemo, all the standard of care chemo, and she said, I didn't know her. She said, have you ever heard of Keytruda? And I said, yeah, that's like the best drug we have for triple negative right now. So I didn't take it. I didn't get it. So you tell a story.
So I was going to just piggyback off of what Mrs. Polanco said is that, yes, that is very true. And you can be highly educated, right? In whatever your field may be, whether it's law or whatever it may be, but breast oncology is highly specialized and is very complicated. I'm emergency medicine, so I know how to detect if someone has appendicitis. I know how to repair your laceration on your forehead, but I don't know much about oncology. I know general aspects of it. So I wasn't abreast of the latest, treatments for breast cancer. And so to also add to the social determinants of it is that cancer does not care about your credentials. It does not care about where you live, your zip code, your bank account balance. It doesn't care about that because it clearly happened to me, and I'm in the healthcare field. And so when I was going through my treatment, I intentionally stopped looking at a lot of journals or whatnot because it was stressing me out because I was reading about complications, and for my mental health preservation, I needed to just go through it. And I said, okay, I'm going to put everything aside and I'm not going to look into it. And it wasn't until the breast cancer symposium, finding out about Keytruda, and I reached out to you. I'm like, my oncologist didn't give me this. There was no conversation. There was no shared decision-making conversations about Keytruda. And when I approached him about it, he turned his screen to me and he says, well, it wasn't on my list. So that's the reason why you didn't get it.
I don't want to call them out.
Yes. He was fired. Yeah, he was fired immediately after that. And even prior to that, I had reached out to him via portal messaging about clinical trials. And that's another scary aspect because, you know, I'm in the healthcare space, so I know the importance of clinical trials, but it's so many women who are burdened with this disease who do not recognize or don't know much about clinical research, or just, like you said, just think it's a, you know, placebo sugar pill and I'm just going to get this and die. And so it's so important. It's scary because we have so much work to do because so many women aren't educated about it. But at the same time, I'm a healthcare provider. I'm sending him actual clinical trial study numbers. Like, I want to get enrolled in this trial. I've already teetered out, okay, I'm eligible for, you know, I meet the criteria for this. And so he was never considering it. It was always, you know, you don't need it. And so with the combination of not receiving Keytruda and not listening to me about getting enrolled into a clinical trial, he was fired. And I think it's also important for people to know that just because you have a physician in front of you and they have these credentials or whatever their credentials are, you are in charge of your health. This is your body. You work for me. We're a part of this team together, and I know my body better than anyone else, and you need to listen to me. And so that is thank you. And that is so important, and it's so instrumental. And women have to feel empowered as you're going through this, because we have to be advocates for ourselves. And after I fired him, I found another oncologist, and I was enrolled in a clinical trial here at Georgetown, a Persevere trial sponsored, I believe I can't remember the sponsor, but I had to ask for it. And
she did it herself. She had to go do it herself.
I had to enroll. I had to ask for it myself. And thankfully, my second oncologist enrolled me in it. And the importance of me being in this trial is because I do have 3 young daughters. And it's important for my biological profile, my Black body, to be studied. Not just for me, not just for you, but because I'm building my medical trust fund for my children. We have 529s, we have Coverdell ESAs for our children, but this is my medical trust fund for my children, because I do not want my children to develop this breast cancer.
Yeah. So we have a lot of work to do, but I think, you know, we just try to have these conversations, you know, and that's what we talk about on The Doctor Is In every week. But so we can overcome the barriers. The time is now, right? Are there any things that we should be doing, like partnerships? I mean, you guys are awesome partners for me and for Touch, but even you know, you guys, Sloan, what do you think? What would help you have more awareness of breast health in your world? And she works at Howard with students. You know, so.
Well, I was actually going to take it right to Howard. One of the things I'm so proud of with Touch is that you all have the HBCU internship program. And that is just so incredible, because bringing this advocacy in an academic setting, in a cultural setting, in a space where, you know, our young students can be talking about this, can be learning about this, can be getting involved and understanding there's advocacy. There are ways that we can utilize the education that we're getting in these schools to further, you know, the research and, you know, further our education and get access earlier. So it is incredible that, you know, we have these different programs that go into HBCUs in particular, so that we are talking about it earlier, and that people can see their place and see that you can start getting involved early. You can start advocating for yourself early, and the more you know, the better you'll be.
Yeah, we've actually had 55 HBCU interns in the last 3 years. And I think in all but 3 cases, we asked the kids to, they're all pre-med, pre-health students, and we asked them to have a conversation with their best friend and their mom or their grandma. And I think all but 3 cases, they had never talked about breast health with their mom ever. And they're all 19, 20 health students. So, that's where it's got to start, though. It's got to start young.
Hey, Ricky, I think the other piece, though, and I think we kind of talked about this earlier, I think it's really, and it sounds like you're doing this with the screening. I think it's really important to talk to your mom, sisters, brothers, but we can't underscore fathers with a certain gene can, like with my husband, I'm trying to say, we're getting our daughter tested for BRCA or whatever. And he's like, why? She can't get prostate. I'm like, no, it's about the gene to the health education piece. It's kind of like, well, if a man has it, then I can't possibly pass it on. But it's more than just talking about the females in your family. It truly is the males and anyone else, because a lot of tumors, a lot of cancers are connected by the different genomics.
Yeah, my dad had colon. So, and even though I don't have a genetic mutation, I have a family history of cancer on both sides. So, and I don't think we know enough about Black bodies. We don't have the science. We just don't know. And I think we can't take the risk of not knowing. Laura, you're going to tell.
Yeah, so thank you for underscoring that, the male and female piece. From a partnership perspective, it is partnering with organizations that are community-based, the faith-based community, D9, and we have the privilege of working with Alpha Kappa Alpha. I'm a member, and getting this message out to the community in a material way and meeting people where they are. And I let Ricky say her favorite phrase, but meeting people where they are in the community, having these really frank conversations. We also have what we call SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters, every month, where we have experts from around the country, badasses, I'll say it too, from around the country, talking about topics that are relevant in a safe space for our community, so that we can talk about these. We talk about this Saturday is just about immune support and nutrition and the importance and the connection of that, particularly when you're on a breast cancer journey. But really having the programming and having the opportunity to be inside the community with individuals to educate them. I also say the clinicians as well, as educating them and sensitizing them to see us and what we look like and what it looks like and what the experience is to be a Black woman, a Black man facing this particular disease and challenging them to do better. And so those are the things I think that we can do materially to have it at both ends, individuals in the community where they are, but also in the clinical community as well, to make sure that we're spreading these messages.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to connect the community back to our internship. So at the end of our internship, we have our interns on The Doctor Is In on BlackDoctor.org at the end of their 10 weeks. And this last time we had this amazing Howard intern that I literally met at homecoming this past year. I had a booth, Sloan visited me, and I met her at homecoming and she applied, was an intern this spring, she is right now. And I want to shout her out because her name is Carmia Beatty. And she, during our conversation, brought up this concept of community. And she said that for young women, we really have to challenge what that means in our world right now, because for so long, Black women community meant, or like in her world, it meant supporting and like being super duper supportive and to a fault, right? And she was like, we now have to say, like, community doesn't just mean, hey, I support you. It means like saying the right thing and like making sure you're challenging your community when they need to be challenged and not just like, supporting. We obviously be supportive. That's who we are, Black women. Like, when you hear something from a Black woman, it hits different than it hear from any other community, because like that's just it's like hearing something from your mom or your grandma. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we're not like just giving this undying support to a fault. We have to make sure that we challenge our community as well to make sure they're involved in clinical trials, know the science, know the things, and not just go along with what your friend is saying because they're your friend, right? No, but like, oh, that was wrong. Like, let's go do that research, look that up, because We just have to make sure we're sharing the right information with our community as we're engaging with them. So yeah.
You have to help each other out with information and direction, and say, okay, you have to do it better, you know? So I was at AACR this week at the Cancer Research Conference, and I met, I was on a panel with Lola, I can't pronounce her name, Vashino Ajay. And so she is the person at the FDA who is doing all the guidance work, right? So basically now pharmaceutical companies are required to provide guidance or a plan for diversity about how they're going to recruit for trials. And so I kind of challenged her, and she still hugged me anyway because I've not been pretty aggressive. How are you going to evaluate these plans, right? How are you going to evaluate these plans? So the pharmaceutical companies are going to write plans for trials. So what's going to be the criteria for whether it's a good plan or not? And I would love for you guys to speak to that, because she didn't have an answer for me.
Yeah, I have the privilege of sitting on our SteerCo for clinical trials and diversity in clinical trials at Novartis. Look, I think overall the industry, everybody's trying to figure it out. What are the right?
I think she's trying to figure it out too.
KPIs, and I think engaging organizations like yours, the patient community, engaging the industry as well. We have to do this together, right? To say, what does good really look like? But I think within the companies, right, the first step is the company looking at itself in the mirror and saying, is this really getting the job done here?
Your baby's ugly. That's
right.
How I say
is
it.
And having, well, I think there's a few things, right? And having the right people on those committees. Linda and I sit on those committees. And so we're able to ask different questions, right? Just because of our own experience, right? And I know all the people on that committee, and there's no one on that committee who's doing this because the FDA told us to do it. We were already working on this because we were already committed to doing it. And we're happy about now the momentum that we're seeing in doing it. And so we are asking, because if you look at oncology and the development of new innovation in medicines, we're going further, earlier in disease, because many of the companies, ours included, we have curative intent. So you typically start, drug development at the back end of the disease, right? Because that's where the need is, right? But as you learn more about it, and you can say, okay, at the end of the disease, you're looking to help people live longer. How can we get on the front end of the disease to say, how can we cure more people, right? And so those patients are found where? Not in the academic centers where we normally spend our time. They're found in the community. So the implication is, how do you train sites to be trial sites who normally do not participate in cancer trials, right? Because most of the cancer trials are done at major cancer centers. And so the companies have to work together to be able to do that at pace, right? It can't take forever. And so they're able to meet the patients where they are in the community, right, to recruit them for trials. So I think that's one big piece. The other is not just registrational trial, but also I'm a big fan of implementation studies in the community, where actually you're looking at not only the drugs, but also the interventions around it. Can you provide importation? What is the case management? It might be different for certain populations of patients.
Right.
That combination of things, right? Does it yield better outcomes in the community? Because what we ultimately want to get to is that if you're going to a major academic center, or you're going to a local community cancer center, do you get the same treatment? Are they following the guidelines? Do you see the same healthcare outcomes? And to me, that's a major KPI, right? To say, now you've democratized outcomes no matter what my zip code is, and if I can't go to a major academic center. And so that's just one example of things that we're looking at.
We work with you guys on that. That was a great project that we actually worked with Novartis on, and helping select sites.
Yes.
And you guys came to us and said, okay, here are some sites. What do you think, Ricky? And they was able to say, no, don't go there, go here. And I think that was a really great opportunity for us to play a role in helping you pick places to go.
Absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
So we're grateful for that.
So I can't speak to a lot of those kinds of details with the way they were organized, and I'm not, sitting on the same kind of boards. Merck Research Labs is going through the same kind of thing, to the point very similar types of things, but actually building it into, the short and long-term strategic plans. How are we developing all of our programs? Oncology happens to be one of them, but how are we looking at all of our tumors and all of our programs to ensure that we have the kind of diversity that we need based upon prevalence, incidence in a lot of these different areas. So there is a very detailed plan. I know that from a business perspective, it's something that is really critical to our research labs. And I think the other exciting area that's, is public, we see a lot of these things. It's really trying to get a little bit earlier to say, how do we take a look at genomics, take a look at biology, and try to understand what can we do early on to either cure or even prevent. Because I think that's the holy grail. How can we prevent cancers from happening? And we're going to be a long way there. And to your point, it's a different thing with going to medical. There are other interventions, other kinds of centers, other kinds of studies that need to be done to be able to accomplish that goal. I don't know that anyone has perfectly cracked that nut, but that's really where the future has to be.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you guys is so awesome. So grateful for it is your intention. And I think even Lola at the FDA Day, her intention is so strong. I think she's been working on trying to even get to this plan stage for years and trying to convince the FDA to do the right thing. So I'm so grateful for what she's doing and that she's trying to challenge you guys. And so I'm challenging her, but we're going to keep challenging everybody.
We challenge everybody.
We challenge everybody. I think we're a little bit out of time, but I have to tell a story about Dr. Gigi, my friend Dr. Gigi back in the so she gave me a really good thought because she worked, and I want to make sure I get this right. She worked in AIDS, right? And I'm old enough to have been around. I was a dancer in grad school, and somebody would sneeze in the class, and oh boy, they're going to die. We didn't really know why. And then trials came out. So the only drugs that you could take with AIDS was a trial. There was nothing else for you. And there's a sense of urgency about getting into a trial. And that's what we're trying to create with breast cancer, because I do believe we're in a critical state for breast cancer in Black women. And so I want to create this sense of urgency that this is the best thing you can do for yourself. This is the best science you can have, the best drugs you can take. So thank you for that thought. Dr. G, I use it all the time with people to say, pretend like you have AIDS and this is all you have, right? So we're doing that. So I think I'm getting the hook. Okay. Anybody have any last thoughts before we get the hook?
I did have just one last thought because you brought up the HBCUs. And I think that the HBCUs historically have been under leveraged because that's a huge area, right, in terms of where our people are. And Linda, in our organization, Linda Armstrong, who's sitting there, she's the president of our Novartis Foundation, leads what we call the Beacon of Hope, where we partner with the 25, 26 HBCUs, 4, maybe 5 now, and medical centers, historically Black medical schools. 3 things that will come out of that. One is we have the internship program, mentorship, so that's one, right? Our commitment is to really produce at least 1,200 medical professionals and support them through whether it's medical school, nurses, what have you, technology, med tech to support them. And the other one is standardization of data. That is so important. So not only the clinical trials, but understanding the data and being able to standardize it to say, oh, if my oxygen levels are red and they're higher, is that, race dependent? And we saw that also in COVID where there were different treatments given based on what the oxygen level was. But we know that the oximeter that reads that, right, there's a bias built in because all the data that went into that was not diverse. Right. And so how do you, to your point about the data, change that for patients? And so I just want to give a shout out to that because as we work with them to become trialists, right, and to certify those different sites, right, you get a critical mass of patients in the community because they trust those medical centers, right? So that's just one. I'm really proud of the company for the commitment to do that. Is a multi-year, 10-year commitment called the Beacon of Hope.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I would also add one more thing, just because of I'm a marketing person, not a scientist or a doctor. And think about the patient, think about the consumer, think about how you talk to them. we don't want to be called underserved. What does that mean?
Right.
Right.
You're
So,
supported.
if you look at all the information when you go to Dr. Google, it talks about us, not to us or with us. And so we're trying to change the game on how we talk about it. So when you think about what you're writing, how you're talking to people, think about how the patient's going to consume it. And that's what we're trying to do. So thank you so much for my awesome panel. Thank you so much. Did we do okay, Alice? You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.